Hey everyone, welcome back to those who are coming back, and welcome to anyone who's here for the first time. I hope you find a home here. We are now in March. I haven't been here in a minute. And Feb was a big month in terms of tax. We had our budget speech, which I think a lot of people spoke on, and they were able to break down and summarize what took place and what the general feel is for the budget, or was for the budget speech. Personally, I think it was one of our better budget speeches for taxpayers, although I think we can improve a lot. That's where the recommendations come in, guys. Please make sure the next opportunity that arises for us to submit our suggestions on the budget and what the finance minister can implement, it affects us, right? I recommend that you do it. Actually, there's a comment that I want to have a look at. I posted on LinkedIn a few weeks ago about the call to action to basically submit recommendations to the finance minister. And someone highlighted that one of the changes came from such a recommendation. So I think that is very encouraging. The comment was left by Lonwabo Lungile, and they said, while the minister eventually took the proposal made by a citizen, particularly the proposal about increasing the revenue requirement to register for VAT from 1 million to 2.3 million, which is huge, right? So bring those suggestions in. I have a lot of suggestions. I myself did, in fact, submit, as you'll see also, my screen recording. So I encourage us, guys, even if it might feel like it's highly unlikely that they'll listen to us, keep submitting. Don't only vote once every 5 years. Submit every opportunity that you get. The louder we are, I think the eventually they hear us, right? So that's the budget speech. It was a better speech, or a better presentation than what we've had in the past couple of years. The tax tables have increased. That should be a standard thing. We're grateful for that, and it should bring a little bit of relief, but there's a lot of areas that our government can improve on in terms of bringing relief to the taxpayer, right? And before the budget speech, I got to speak to an Uber driver called Maxwell. Shout out to him. Special thanks to him for allowing me to interview him. I did post the first half of that interview in the last video, and we said it was to be continued, right? So this video is also going to be a continuation of that, a reaction to what he basically said in the second part, because it ended up being a conversation, and I think it was a lot to take in. So I'll see what commentary I'll add to what he had to say, but I respect whatever he had to say. I'm not here to correct him or change his views or anyone's views. I'd love to speak to more people and hear what they have to say about tax. And then the other part was I got to be interviewed as well by the SABC, or rather by Criselda Lewis, on her show on the SABC called The Agenda. What a professional. She was incredible. She helped me calm down. I was quite nervous, but I did enjoy that, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Shout out to the person who shared the opportunity with me. But at the end of this video, I'll have a mini game that we'll play, right? So you might want to stay tuned until the end of the video. Welcome, if this is your first time, to Taxing Matters. I think something to highlight with my conversation with Maxwell, he had never encountered my channel before, but there's certain things that came to remembrance when listening to him and speaking to him. A lot of these things we have touched on. We spoke about side hustles, that SARS is that shadow attached to your side hustle. SARS is there whether you can see them or not, right? And I think it's very important what he mentioned there, right? So what your employer could be doing for you if you are employed, or what they are required to do by law, is to withhold PAYE, or a portion of your salary that needs to be paid over to SARS as tax on your behalf, so that by the time the year ends, by the time Feb comes along, you don't have a huge bill in what you have to pay. And what we advised previously is that you not go back. Actually, if you have a side hustle, you should be doing what your employer would be doing for you if you were employed. Be your own employer, right? That's the expectation, is that you need to then take a portion of what you're earning and put it away. That was one of our nuggets, our blue nuggets that we shared initially on this channel, to say, if you get 100 Rand, maybe take 10% of that, put it away, create a savings account for yourself that can grow with interest. There are tax-free savings accounts as well, so that interest could still benefit you whether you end up paying tax or not. At least have that. Also mentioned that in my interview with Criselda Lewis, where I said, practically speaking, to be better compliant, you shouldn't only focus on declaring, right, which is the first biggest hurdle that people need to overcome, because we don't generally want to tell SARS about an income that they might not be aware of. But it's declaring, right? And with being an influencer, you can't hide the nature of the income that you generate as an influencer is seen. You have to publicize, or even on YouTube, for example, or I'm sure a lot of these platforms have it, but the moment you promote something, you have to indicate that this video or this content includes a sponsorship or a paid promotion or whatever. So you can't hide the fact that you're making income as an influencer. But in the event that your side hustle is not being an influencer, create the discipline for yourself. You don't need this discipline if you're employed, legally speaking. But if you're in the informal sector, you're creating your own form of employment, you then also still have to have the discipline or cultivate the discipline of putting money away as you make money, right? So that if SARS comes back and says, actually, or you determined by your submissions that you actually now owe 5,000 Rand, hopefully you have a good amount of money that can contribute to that 5,000 Rand that you now need to pay physically over to SARS. Please, guys, like, I think for me, that's the most important thing, because the thing that stresses people the most is the lack of cash flow when it comes to a tax liability. Actually, I think what Maxwell's mentioning here is somewhat valid. So the truth is, the middle class is affected the most, because technically what you earn is less than what a rich person earns. So the amount of money that you have left over, even though we are taxed on a progressive scale, meaning the less you earn, the less tax that you'll pay in terms of the absolute value, right? Because the percentage is applied on a lower amount, but the impact to someone who's earning a lower amount is greater than if you earn 1 million Rand a month. That same percentage applied would result in a larger amount, larger value, but obviously with a progressive scale of tax, they would then apply a higher percentage, meaning they end up paying even more. So the truth is, more people are middle class and they are impacted more in that sense. But the truth also is that rich people are taxed a lot. They actually, I think I'll have to get the stats inserted here, but they pay more than 50% of all the tax that is paid in South Africa. As much as they have the money to move things around, and they're able to hire people to help them plan better and make certain investments so that they pay as little tax as possible, but they do end up paying a lot. And SARS does have a separate segment that focuses on high income earners. And yeah, I think I wanted to highlight that, because I think the perception a lot of the times is that rich people don't pay their share, and they actually do. And the risk that we sit with, or a government sits with, is the more they push to try and tax high net worth individuals, the more they push them away, and they're at risk of these people actually leaving the country and losing that income eventually, right? And because they're in the position to be able to do so, they can just immigrate. Whereas we who don't earn that much, we go through a lot more to actually be able to move our entire lives out of the country. If we say we're trying to run away from SA and the taxes and stuff like that. So I think I just wanted to highlight that, or to give that context, to say SARS does focus on high net worth individuals, and they are taxed and they do somewhat pay their share. But I think there is a way to balance the tax system and have a more equitable taxing system. I think that's an important point. It actually triggers something that I was thinking about recently. I think there's a lot of classism and segregation where we don't come together as citizens, because actually we all face the same problem of being overburdened by tax. Yes, some feel it more than others, but that doesn't mean that we don't share a common struggle, right? So sometimes we look at a group of people and we say they deserve to be taxed more, i.e. rich people. Personally, think about it. If you end up becoming wealthy, do you want to be taxed, or are you going to agree with that sentiment that you might have currently and say, I would want to be taxed more if I was a millionaire? Would you? I think there should be an incentive for people to work harder, and actually, if the economy is set up in a way that you work hard and you can actually see the benefits of your working hard and you are rewarded for that, and you actually grow and become wealthier, I think there should be an incentive for people to work harder and get wealthier. Then it's almost like now you're punished for being rich in South Africa. It's like, tax the rich, tax the rich. And it's like, yeah, tax them, but it doesn't mean that you have to take everything that they have and they own, right? As much as if you were the one that was rich, you wouldn't agree with someone wanting or feeling entitled to take everything that you own, or even 50% of everything that you own, going to the government. Imagine that pain. So as much as we can be like Abu Motipe, they are one side and the rest of us are one side, or maybe it's the Motipes and then you have your CAs or engineers and doctors, they are a different class of people, and then you have the rest of us that are struggling. It's like, yes, the varying or the degrees of struggle might not be the same, but we are still all impacted by a corrupt government and the cost of that corruption hitting us, right? So instead of almost being resentful towards one another, let us come together and work together to find a solution that works for all of us, that creates an environment for everyone to be able to succeed as best as possible, right? Not everyone can be rich, but things should be set up in such a way, right, where you are taxed, the government takes that money to create an environment so that anyone who applies themselves using certain principles can get almost a guaranteed outcome. That I would think is justice, right? Equal opportunity, but the outcome is determined based on how well you use that opportunity. That's what I believe in, right? So the government, I think their role should be in regulating our environment to make it as conducive as possible for people to be able to succeed and not have to then tax people who do succeed. It's almost like you get punished, right? It's almost like, okay, let me also not work so that I can actually benefit from the government and get grants, because it seems like that is more of the incentive that is created versus the incentive of, okay, go to school, work hard, succeed, start that business, start that side hustle, follow the rules and succeed, and you are being rewarded to succeed. But right now it seems like we get penalized for succeeding, so I think we should change the lens in which we view one another and have more grace and love for one another as the common man who is pulling their weight, right? We all wake up, we put in the work, we work hard, and we all should see the benefits of that hard work. We should reap the benefits of that hard work. I do think you can achieve the same outcome without striking. I put forward a recommendation to the finance minister saying that if the government, I think I also did have a video, I made a video speaking about this, but if the government says I'm going to provide X, Y, and Z, and they are getting the money to do X, Y, and Z, they allocate the budget to do X, Y, and Z. If they do not achieve X, Y, and Z, and as a result of not achieving X, Y, and Z, the citizen then has to pay in addition to whatever taxes they paid to actually get X, Y, and Z, or just X. I believe that the taxpayer should be able to present evidence, right, if it's required, but there should be a policy or a rebate or a credit that exists for certain services that a taxpayer would pay. A tax credit, medical tax credit is an example of something like that, but I think there's an opportunity where you can expand, right? And the result of that is that the government potentially has to pay out a lot of the money that they would have bought in, right, or collected. SARS, a lot of money that SARS would have collected in the form of taxes, would now need to pay that back to the taxpayer as compensation for having had to use their own money to pay for something that the tax money should have paid for, right? So the striking might not, it's radical, yes. It could send the right message, but at the same time, the likelihood of achieving that is low because it's illegal, right? And we spoke about the fact that tax evasion is illegal, right? But tax avoidance is legal. So a way of avoiding tax is following the tax rules that exist that reduce the amount of tax that you can end up paying. And one way then that the government can introduce a legal way for us to pay less tax is to recognize and to implement, or to recognize the imbalances, right? And to then correct those imbalances using policy, tax policies, to say, okay, we'll pay you back if you end up paying for certain things that the government should have made available because we took money from you to do those things, but we ended up not doing them. And therefore, here's a rebate, here's a credit that actually reduces the amount of tax you might end up paying. The overall impact, I think, is similar because the disposable income that the government then has is less. And Treasury can then implement certain measures to say, okay, if you pay back, let's say you collected 100 million for a certain, let's say X, you collected, or SARS collected 100 million and it was allocated by the finance minister to activity X, right? But then of that 100 million, 30 million was refunded back to taxpayers. Then the next budget allocation should be 70 million to the government as a penalty to them. They have less money, they should have less money available. But the inverse would also be true. If they end up delivering, then they still get the 100 million allocated to them, maybe even adjusted for an increase, but they would have proved that I used this 100 million well. The actual impact is seen by the fact that taxpayers are not claiming for paying for X to the tune of 30 million rand in our example. And therefore, you are awarded to keep your budget and have more money available to you potentially to continue to do X, to deliver. We cry a lot about service delivery. So in my mind, that makes sense. It's something that can, I think, be discussed in good faith without being combative and not approaching the government in a hostile manner. Hopefully, right? We can only hope. I think let's learn the system as Black people. Let's learn the system, excel, in applying the system and help other fellow Black people also get better in working within the system, so that we are not operating from a place of ignorance and therefore we are always at a disadvantage. And also, let's not try to cheat the system and find ourselves in prison or disadvantaged against the law because the law is being applied against us. What do you guys think? Do you think that if you're a public servant, you're working for the government, should you be allowed to have interest in a private company or have shares or be a beneficial owner elsewhere? I guess that's why you have disclosure policies. But conflict of interest is a interesting concept. It's a real thing, right? Like if I own a water purifying company and I'm also in the government and I am responsible to ensure that there's service delivery, there is clean water that is reaching each and every household, will I be diligent in doing that job, or will I be okay with that system collapsing so that I can profit more from purifying water privately? Interesting concept that he mentioned. I'd like to hear what you guys think about that. And I think to wrap up today's episode, I'd like to go through some of the comments that we've gotten over the past couple of days, especially from my interview with Criselda Lewis. I'll link the full interview in the description box. Have a listen to it if you haven't, if you'd like to, of course. But I'd like to react to some of the comments that I've seen there. Speaking on influencers, so someone on LinkedIn commented, it's income and anything in kind, ? They're definitely going to be above the threshold of 95,750 Rand. That's the threshold so if you earn above that, he's basically saying that definitely they'll reach that threshold. And then I responded to say, definitely if they receive enough brand deals. I think the nature of the income tax system for the individual being taxed on the progressive scale embedded in that is to say, if you are not a popular YouTuber, if you're as small as me, I'm not earning anything, or not YouTuber only, but influencer, but I have very few followers. I'm not earning anything on social media. So I have nothing to declare as of right now. The date is E9 March 2026. As of right now, I have nothing to declare to SARS when it comes to social media, right? So you wouldn't expect someone like me to suffer because of this thing, right? So the bigger a platform grows and the more income you actually receive, it makes sense that you would end up paying more potentially, but it wouldn't automatically impact even like a struggling influencer or someone who's still coming up, if I can put it that way. So I said, if they receive enough brand deals, because even that, you have to be at a certain point in terms of your following and stuff like that to even get a brand deal, right? And then perhaps a better brand deal is the one that mostly involves cash compensation to give them a better opportunity to have cash flow for a potential tax liability. And I think maybe how we negotiate certain brand deals becomes important. Yes, it's nice to receive stuff and unbox. It's fun. But is it practical for you? Unless you can secure cash flow for the things that you are not receiving cash, if you can secure cash flow, then great, accept it. But maybe if you can see that this brand deal involves me receiving goods, maybe try negotiate differently. I don't know. I don't know how much leeway there is when it comes to things like that. And then she just responded to say interesting developments. And then on Twitter itself, Khadi MM says they must pay. That's what I was talking about earlier. Like this attitude where we're like, like towards one another. It's okay. For me, yeah, everyone pays, unfortunately. And for me, I think the right conversation is to say, yes, we must all pay, but at the same time, with all of us paying, we must hold the torch towards the government to say, okay, we're all doing our part, we're all pulling our weight. What are you doing with this money that we are giving you, right? It shouldn't end on the person just suffering. Like, we want people to suffer. You want the rich to suffer. You want the influencer to suffer because you're suffering. Yes, we're all suffering. I guess suffering is better when you feel like you're all suffering. And it's unfair that certain people make free money. I get it. I get the comment from that point of view. But ultimately, I think the better conversation is to say, once that person has paid, then what? You know? And then Brian Griffin says it's voluntary compliance. And then has this emoji and a laughing emoji. Yes. So a voluntary tax system means that you volunteer the information to SARS. They rely on you being trustworthy, being honest, but it doesn't stop them from digging deeper and auditing you and saying actually you are lying and you don't want to find yourself there. So you'd rather be honest from the onset. So the incentive for that is the penalties that they charge you and the interest that they charge you if you lie. Like I said, you can take the risk of telling them lies, but it is a risk, a very costly one. So wouldn't advise it. And then just some comments from TikTok. Okay, there's a comment by Ndlovukazi K _K says, instead of making TikTok pay us, you want to reap that small income. Since the government wants influencers' money, they should open more doors for them. I get this person's sentiment. Okay, so my sister helps me out with my TikTok account. She does a lot of things. She's a photographer, videographer, and she also manages social media accounts. Like I said, I don't like social media. I'm not a social media person. So she's helping me. She's managing my social media accounts currently, most of them, when it comes to the tech stuff. So she just responded there. She doesn't work for SARS. She's a chartered accountant and a tax practitioner. She was brought on to speak about that from that perspective. But I do understand where Ndlovukazi is coming from to say the money that TikTok, people that are making money on TikTok don't get as much money. The truth is, like I said, the moment you start earning money, SARS is knocking on your door. They just had to formally come out and say it, but it was always a given, right? And I do agree that with the money that SARS collects from influencers, they should definitely benefit from that money. So the government, again, should be using that money to create an environment where those people can thrive, right? So if I just compare other countries, Bollywood, Nollywood, like there's countries where people who are in the arts make a lot of money. America, Hollywood, obviously, make a lot of money with their talent. South Africans are very talented. And the government should definitely be using tax money to make sure that people that are not conventionally inclined in terms of going to school, doing maths, physics, and they get rewarded with high-paying jobs, the government should be creating an environment for influencers to really thrive using the tax money that they are collecting. 100%. I agree with Ndlovukazi when it comes to that. And Imran Valley 285 is saying SARS is legal crooks. SARS are just people that collect, right? Just as a tax practitioner, I form part of SARS, helping SARS to collect money on behalf of the government. The government, I would say, are crooks if they don't do what they are supposed to do with the tax money. Hence, I emphasize we need to be louder about getting accountability. Like Maxwell said, we're very good at voicing our opinions on social media, but do it where it counts. We must be constructive, not destructive. Where they give us opportunities to speak up, to put through submissions, do that so that we can hold them to account. And yeah, then they won't be crooks, because then there's an exchange, right? Crooks, or scams, because it's a one-way direction. You just take, and you take something that you didn't earn and that you shouldn't be yours. For government to rightfully earn tax money, they need to be doing the stuff that allows people to even earn the money that they are taxing. And where that doesn't exist, definitely it's a scam. That's why corruption is such a terrible thing, very unjust. But SARS is not the one that executes. They just collect the money on behalf of the government, but the people that execute and spend the money are the ones that we are saying we should hold to account. And then there was another comment. Z2199X says, I don't see this much noise when it comes to tithes, yet we have pastors giving G-Wagons. Okay, so I think she's saying they are targeting influencers, but they are not targeting pastors as such. It's an interesting conversation. Actually, my next video that I'm planning to record touches on church a little bit. Not fully focused on church per se, but yeah, I think we'll touch on churches a little bit. But I guess what they're saying is that pastors should be taxed too and be investigated. So I don't have context as to how SARS approaches pastors and the likes. But the church itself, if it's a registered non-profit, it doesn't get taxed as the organization, but the salaries that your pastors would receive, or people that work at the church, I would assume should be taxable. But yeah, I do agree that maybe that should be a focus area perhaps for SARS, and maybe they are going there. I don't know. Maybe they've been doing it. I just don't know enough about that. Okay, so Scritchy says it's about time people telling stories that have been told by other people at Isaiah. So Isaiah, please tell us your story. I don't know what else to say to that comment. Please tell us your story. And that's about it. Thank you for joining me and watching this episode, or getting to the end of this episode if you're still here. Hopefully you didn't just fast forward to the end. But yeah, take care and God bless.